But let's talk about the Trump tax cut in particular. First of all, there's a lot of demonization against corporations and against businesses. When businesses thrive, they have to employ people. And so 3.5 million jobs have been created since the start of the Trump administration. Most of those are middle-class jobs. Wages have gone up about 3.8% in the last year. They were flatlining under the Obama presidency. My favorite number...
I'm sorry, that's not true.
Excuse me.
Well,
I'm not going to sit here
Sam,
and have lies about facts. Everybody has a phone. Google middle-class wages. See if they're stagnant versus inflation.
So 3.8% wage increase over the last year for the median worker. Hispanic income is at its highest level in American history at $50,000 a year. My favorite number of the Trump administration is that 3.9 million people have gone off food stamps and into the labor force. 3.9 million people. Now, why is that my favorite number? For us conservatives, we do not judge success by how many people go on government programs, but instead of how many people go off into independence. Now, I will not say that our economy is at its optimal level. I think it's the best economy in a generation. You look at a 4.2% GDP growth, 3.7% unemployment rate. And so if you judge the middle class by two major things, which is standard of living increase, of which you're seeing that happen dramatically, and the second of which is education. We have a lot of work to do on the education side. I think you and I would both agree on that. We could have an extended conversation about that on policy. But the economic metrics are so good that the New York Times says, quote, this economy is so good, we're running out of ways to critique it. And so, again, it's not a perfect economy, but for middle-class Americans that care about rising wages, creating jobs, and tax cuts, the average American family had a $2,700 tax cut under this Trump tax cut. That's good for consumer spending power, that's good for savings, and it's good for, of course, what you would say is more demand-side economics, coupled with supply-side economics that created jobs and repatriated trillions of dollars of wealth back to America.
So everyone here has a phone, and they can Google the first 18 months of the Trump administration versus the last 18 months of the Obama administration. Wages have gone up 1.7%. Under the first 18 months of the Trump administration, inflation is up 3.8%. That is simply a fact. Now, if you narrow the time horizon, you can come up with numbers you're talking about. And this is why people have to be careful about statistics, because I can come up here and manipulate anything. Yes, Latino wages are up. In fact, the middle class is making more money today than in $61,000 than in the past. However, like I say, inflation is up. The cost of higher education has gone up 110% since 1994. So it doesn't matter if the middle class is making $61,000 if to lead the middle class life that you were talking about is that much more expensive. If the middle class liked the tax cuts, they wouldn't disfavor them far greater than they do even Obamacare at this point, right? I mean, so the bottom line is, we can throw out statistics, but if they're not contextualized, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
everyone knows the tax cuts went to the wealthy. Am I demonizing them? No. The point is that they have an inordinate amount of wealth and income in this country, and it turns into political power. And I know you have a problem with that. And the way to solve that is to flatten the tax, is to not give them tax cuts and more power, and give corporations more power and cash to pay off their shareholders, which tend to be the board of directors and the CEOs, but rather to spread the wealth.
It doesn't make the economic growth, the economic success any less exceptional or any less historic, because
it's following the same trajectory as the Obama administration.
Hold on a second.
It goes like this.
Okay, so for those that get wealthy because of access to power, such as 8 out of the 10 wealthiest counties in America around Washington, D.C., they're not actually creating anything that I would consider to be of value to the middle class, because they're being rewarded to their geographic proximity to a $4.4 trillion federal budget that is extracting money away from middle-class Americans. Those are the lobbyists, those are the trial lawyers, those are the people working for the corporations that are lobbying not on behalf of middle America, but on behalf of people around Washington, D.C. So in that, you and I will agree.
Well, Okay,
Maybe not.
the people who live in the counties you're talking about are overwhelmingly arms sales and military-industrial complex people.
I'm not
the
defending
Trump administration raised the budget of the military
I don't agree with
by $700 billion over the next 10 years.
But Sam,
that money's flowing into those. Is that right or wrong?
I don't agree with that, though. So I have a consensus
well,
that
but my point is Donald Trump is the one who is leading that extraction of wealth.
So first of all,
but let me finish.
Didn't you say I can interrupt you if you said
if
something?
I said something wrong?
Yes. So it's only $700 billion of our budget every single year. What's the rest? It's to entitlements. It is to the federal bureaucracies. To how about the government contracts for housing and urban development? The government contracts for health and human services.
Well, you were talking
what about
about
the government
those
contracts? Yeah. So those
counties
counties that get the government contracts outside of the defense contracts are also what I put my critique on.
Minuscule. The
$3.2 trillion is not minuscule.
It's a made-up number. Let's talk Kansas for a moment, shall we? Because you can talk about what a small business does for employment. I'm a small businessman, and I understand what small business does. In Kansas, if I had been living in Kansas, I would have gotten a huge tax break because I'm an S corp. Huge. Under Sam Brown back in 2012. He brought in Arthur Laffer, who I'm sure you're familiar with, is the god for folks like you in many respects. The idea being, if we cut taxes on the wealthy, they will spread this wealth. It will trickle down on all of us. It will shower down on us, right? It will rain upon us. And we will all be sprinkled with this golden shower, if you will. And the economy will explode. And people will have jobs, and everything will work out. In fact, revenue will go up. That's what Mitch McConnell told us after this tax cut, too. And what happened in Kansas was a disaster. It was such an unmitigated disaster. Not only did it destroy Kansas's educational system, the Republican-controlled State House rose taxes 4 years later because their economic growth lagged, their employment lagged, and then Sam Brownback was literally made ambassador to like ether, right? He's like the ambassador to religion now. He's been jettisoned into the atmosphere in some way because that is the perfect example of the Republican conservative philosophy, and it failed. And we know that it's failing now on a national level.
Can I chip in here?
Because Mitch McConnell made the same promise about the deficit. In fact, Larry Kudlow, the chief economic advisor of the president, made this same promise in July. And we now have a deficit that is twice the size it was when Obama left office. And now Mitch McConnell wants to cut Medicare and Social Security because of those taxes.
You're not going to hear me. You're not going to hear me defend federal deficits or our exploding national debt. Quick fact: Barack Obama added more debt than any other president in U.S. history. He doubled the national debt.
Do you defend these tax cuts that have doubled the deficit?
And so if you want to talk about the contrast to states, it's the red states that are rated 9 out of 10 of the most pro-business states in America have Republican governors and Republican legislatures. The most pro-growth states in America are run by Republicans. I'm glad you mentioned it, though.
The reason why I bring up Kansas is because the dynamic is identical to the one that Donald Trump, and this is what we're talking about, that Donald Trump and the Republicans did on a national level. Now, here's how the game works, and this is why it is zero-sum. Because you give these massive tax cuts to the wealthy, and you repatriate money from overseas that ends up going into shareholder buybacks, to stock buybacks. We know that 84% of stocks in this country are owned by the top 10%.
This is a great point. I want to...
And, great. And 60% of those tax dollars that were repatriated went into the hands of those people. We saw no job growth as a function of that repatriation. We saw none of the trickle down that we're supposed to see. We see these tax cuts, and then Mitch McConnell brings down the hammer. We're going to cut Social Security. We're going to cut Medicare. These are the most popular, the most successful programs in the country, and the only way the Republicans can cut them is to create an economic crisis. And that is by giving money to wealthy people.
Okay, where would you point to as 1, 2, or 3 examples that you think are the best embodiment of the worldview that you hold?
Yeah, so I think that that all of the things that I want, I do not think exist together right now in the world. But if you want to talk about places where a lot of the policy goals that I'd support, have been implemented, I certainly don't think they're fully socialist societies by any stretch of the imagination, but I think a lot of it has been implemented. I would talk about, the places you'd expect me to talk about, your Swedens, your Finlands, your Denmarks, your Norways. Now, these are complicated societies that, there are right-wing parties win elections sometimes too, and they do things that I don't like, but I think that these are places, broadly speaking, where a lot has been done to take certain things, like healthcare, for example, outside of the market so that people have that kind of freedom that I'm talking about, that they're not tied to jobs that they hate because they're worried that they and their families' basic needs aren't going to be taken care of if they don't stay in that subservient relationship. And you talked earlier about how you want the state to support things that are objectively good.
Yes.
It seems to me that living longer is objectively good.
Yes.
Having lower infant mortality is objectively good. And I would also say that having greater freedom to live your life how you want and not being tied to a particular job, I think that's also objectively
So
good.
job mobility is interesting. I want to get into that. So I'm not stunned you mentioned the Scandinavian countries.
Sure, yeah.
So Denmark doesn't have a minimum wage.
Well, but you got to do the other half of that. That they don't have a minimum wage, but they have vastly more favorable terrain for unions than the United States does, and so a lot of the wage floor is enforced that way. It's still not just they get whatever the market says they get.
But no government mandated minimum wage. What I find interesting, and there are some aspects of the Scandinavian countries appeal to me.
Sure.
According to the World Economic Freedom Index, every country outside of Norway is more economically free than the United States. And so, is that something that would interest you? If economic freedom is the definition of your view, then I would change the Bernie Sanders shirt.
I think that what I mean by economic freedom and what they mean by economic freedom are going to be very different. I think oftentimes if you look at the methodology of those lists, it's very unclear. Like you'll get like the Cato Institute or whoever in some cases will do these lists where they rank places by freedom, and it's like the things that they get points for, the things they don't get points for. Abortion doesn't matter. Whether you can have raw milk matters. I think are at least unclear to me. But I think this is the bigger philosophical thing,
Sure.
though, right? Like let's just do this rather than getting into the nitty gritty about the lists. I think that what those guys mean by economic freedom is how much business owners are free to conduct their business however they want, without interference by the state. What I would mean by freedom in an economic context is the right of ordinary people to live the kinds of lives that they want to live and not be under the thumb to the extent that people are in the United States of whatever some corporation, wants to make them do.
Denmark has actually come out and has said, stop calling us socialist. We are not socialist. You've seen that quote.
Well, I have seen it, but here's
okay,
here,
good.
but I would like to say
Please
something
do.
about this. I think that saying that there's here is this center-right kind of prime minister who says, no, these social gains have nothing to do with socialism, and you say, oh, well, he says it, right? So therefore, he must be speaking for Denmark as a whole, the Danish hive mind, I think is approximately equivalent to if the only two, if you were from Denmark and the only two Americans you'd ever talk to were Bernie Sanders and me, and you said, well, here's what they say about what America's all about. Here's what they say about, Social Security or the
Yes.
post office. This is the American point of view. I think, if you look at how long socialist parties were in power in Denmark and how many of those programs came about under them, I would not say that these are societies that have achieved socialism. We could certainly talk about what that would mean to me. But I would say that these are societies where socialist parties allied with strong unions have brought about really beneficial social reforms as an effort to move farther in that direction.
So let's administrative
You
state.
think I like Woodrow Wilson, the guy who
Probably.
I mean, Woodrow Wilson is the guy who resegregated the federal bureaucracy
Oh,
after it
trust
was
me, I could
integrated.
do a whole speech on
He
that.
put Eugene V. Debs in jail. Nobody on the left is going to see Woodrow Wilson as a hero. Liberals, nobody on the left. But I was just going to say,
I know plenty of people that would, but that's fine.
I don't think
How
I don't think you're going to find a lot of socialists
FDR,
who agree.
LBJ,
But
John
they have
Dewey, all these people believed in a strong administrative
Well, I
state.
mean, you're rattling off a bunch of liberals, but that's okay. We don't need to argue about the historical figures. I think that Karl Marx is a basically positive figure. I think that the theory of history is mostly right, and I also I see you smiling. Happy to get into it.
I'm happy to debate the Hegelian
Well,
dialectic and the phenomenology of spirit.
Oh, okay.
No, not debate it. We can discuss it.
Not where I thought this was going, but that's cool. But I think,
No, I mean that's basically what you mean by the theory
well,
of history,
I
right?
don't think it is. I think there's a big difference there.
He was the head of the young Hegelians.
Well, he started out as a Hegelian, and then he rejected it in favor of what in some ways structurally is similar, but in some ways is the opposite, because it's based on materialism.
At 8 weeks, we have tails. At 8 weeks, an embryo has tails. Do humans have tails, Charlie?
I'm sorry, what?
Serious question. Do human beings have tails?
I'm not exactly sure the essence of the
Do
question.
human beings have tails? Do you have a tail?
You know, I have never met anyone with a tail. I'm not exactly sure the
Exactly. But
wisdom of the
fetuses have tails. Kind of proves that at that phase, they are not a human being. They got tails. Humans don't have tails. We're not dinosaurs. Let me even show you a photo, if I may, okay? Do you truly, in your heart of hearts, truly believe that this is a human being? This,
Without a doubt.
without a doubt?
Yes.
This is a dolphin fetus.
So let me.
Without a doubt, a dolphin fetus is a human being. This is a human fetus. Look how similar they look, but quite different. Dolphin. You just confirmed that a dolphin, in life, do you confuse dolphins for human babies often?
So let me
You
ask
go to
you a question.
SeaWorld and you're like, someone's got human babies in that aquarium. Get the human babies out of the aquarium.
Well, you labeled it as a human fetus.
No,
so
I
you
did
that
not.
dishonestly.
No, I did not.
But
I didn't label it as anything.
Let me. But you.
Doesn't say human fetus on there.
Let me ask you a question though. So let's hold up those two pictures again.
Sure.
Is there a moral difference between the dolphin and the baby?
At this stage, no.
No,
you just,
no,
and
no,
you
no,
just
no.
confirmed that.
Let me ask you: a human and a dolphin. Is it okay to kill one and not the other? Is there a difference morally between a human and a dolphin?
I mean, I don't like to kill dolphins, but when
Do you
they're
do you like to kill babies?
No, I don't. And when they're living, I certainly am not in favor of killing either, but obviously I protect a human over a dolphin.
Hold up the human one.
Sure.
Is that not alive?
No, it is not alive.
Well, then how is it able to have a heartbeat?
It's attached to an alive being called a woman.
Wait,
who
so
is the
it
mother.
doesn't have a heartbeat, does it?
No, it doesn't have a true heartbeat.
Oh, yes, it does.
At some point it does.
22 days after conception, the child's heart begins to circulate. Not alive?
That is also disputed science and not
At
correct.
just 6 weeks, the child's eyes and eyelids, nose and mouth and tongue have formed. Not alive?
No. It is not a heartbeat at 22 weeks.
So wait, hold on. It's either dead or alive. Which one is it?
That is not true. It is becoming...
Pick one.
It's dead currently. It is
Oh,
not
it's dead.
alive. It is not alive.
So you were once dead.
You
before
defined
were
life
alive?
as distinct. It's not distinct. It's attached
It's totally
to somebody
distinct.
feeding it. Distinct means on its own.
No,
is
it
it not
doesn't.
attached to
That's-
its mother?
That's a different. That's autonomous. not
Distinct is the same.
Distinct means it has its own DNA, its own composition.
That's the definition of the word distinct, is its own DNA and composition?
Well, that's the
Incorrect.
So it is unique.
So is sperm, and so is eggs, and so is everything. Dolphins are unique. That doesn't mean you can or can't kill
let
them
me
or
ask
put them
you
in
a question.
aquariums.
There's 1 million abortions every single year. Do you think that's too many or not enough?
I think it's whatever the mother decides with her own family is the right move for their life, and it's none of our damn business.
So if a mother murders an 18-month-old, is that okay?
No, it's not the human being. It's an autonomous
So it becomes a human being the moment it comes out of the womb.
Right, when it
So what do
can
you say about now
breathe.
the youngest pregnancy ever done, 22 weeks and 1 day, that baby is now 1 year old? Was that not a human being when it was delivered by C-section?
I don't follow. Say that again.
So last year, the youngest ever human being on record was delivered at 22 weeks and 1 day. That baby is now 1 year old since the time of that birth.
This is now a living baby, you're correct.
That's okay. So as soon as it comes out of the womb, it is living.
That is correct. If it's alive when it comes out of the womb, we don't know, right? A lot of babies die at childbirth. That's why you don't know until
Well, not
they're
a lot
born.
of babies die at childbirth.
Yeah, a lot.
Very, very
a
low
lot.
percentage.
Can someone Google that for me, please? Can you please Google how many babies die at childbirth every year?
We have some of the lowest childbirth mortality rates in the world, thankfully.
No, we do not. We have some of the highest We have some of the highest. United States infant mortality rate places us 16th among the nations of the world.
How many nations are there,
Thousands of
Ben?
infants die each year because of inadequate medical care that you often vote against and don't support.
I'm not elected official.
But you support things and
I
you
vote
have the
against.
influence of millions. You don't have a vote? Are you suppressing your own vote now too, or just others?
Are you saying that I vote in Congress?
I'm saying that you vote in elections and you decide who goes to Congress, do you not? And do you not support bills or not support bills based on your massive influence?
I know
think you do.
you're getting really worked up.
No, I'm not.
So let me ask you a question.
Also, we rank 33 out of 36 in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development Nations, OECD nations, ranked by U.S. News and World Report for prenatal and early childhood care that you often do not support. In fact, recently, when Biden suggested just $225 billion to support children more in the early years of their lives, you went against it and said, oh, capping it while theoretically, you paid empty lip service to it and said, well, theoretically it's a good idea. $225 billion is so expensive, and it caps the amount they can spend on their children at 7% of income a year, and by doing that, there's no incentives then for them to seek cost-effective care. When you had no problem with Donald Trump spending $8 trillion, giving trillions and trillions of tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, and raising the national debt to $27 trillion.
Can I be
no
honest,
issue
Russell?
with that. But helping the kids that you care about so much, the babies you care about so much, that you want to force women to give birth to them, and then they can go f themselves once they're born because you don't give a shit and you vote against it constantly. Bravo!
Can I be
What a
honest?
hill to die on.
I have no idea what the heck you're talking
You
about.
don't? Well, you went on the record about it.